July 17th, 1996. Shortly after takeoff, TWA Flight 800 crashed off the coast of Long Island, New York. All 230 souls were lost. I was a young U.S. Navy deep-sea diver stationed in Virginia at a salvage unit. And we, along with several other military and civilian diving assets, were tasked with the recovery of Flight 800 to bring all victims and wreckage to the surface. We made our way to the coast of New York, and the salvage boat that I was on was anchored over the first-class section and cockpit of the wreckage. And I was assigned to the night crew. And that evening, geared up to do my first dive. My dive buddy and I got our dive helmets on, and we were put on the stage, which is just a platform that's lowered down by a crane, to begin our 120-foot descent to the torn-up wreckage below. As we landed on the wreckage somewhat askew, we stepped off the stage with one mission, only one priority: victim recovery. Jerry went to the right, and I went to the left. And a couple minutes into the dive, I hear over the communications, "Hey, Dan, I need some help recovering a guy." So I made my way back to where Jerry was on the wreckage and assisted him in recovering a gentleman still buckled into his first-class seat. It was the first victim I had ever recovered, but unfortunately, it would not be the last. Well, we finished our dive and were directed back to the stage to begin our ascent to fulfill our decompression obligations. And we hung at 30 feet, and this indestructible 30-something realized the brevity of life at that point and really began to rethink things. Well, we came up and over and finished the dive, and I kept thinking about the pressures of the dive that weren't associated with diving. There's a lot of pressure associated with a dive like that. One, we were working 12 on, 12 off. We had the pressure, emotional and mental, from recovering victims. We had the indirect pressure of the family and friends on the beach anticipating the news that their loved one had been recovered, not knowing if that was going to happen or not. We were working 12 on, 12 off, and we periodically had to meet with counselors to address the increasingly gruesome task of victim recovery from that kind of wreckage. A lot of crazy pressures, We all have pressures in our lives. Most of you may not experience what I experienced on TWA Flight 800, but I'm sure you've all had pressures in your life, day-to-day pressures. But then there's those out-of-the-ordinary pressures that we experience. We could probably name dozens of them right now. A sudden death in the family, a cancer diagnosis, a key relationship in your life gone bad due to some sort of betrayal, bankruptcy, complete hair loss. There's all kinds of pressures that we have. I had to let you off the hook a little bit. We have to figure out how to deal with those. Every dive I've ever been on has pressure. And I eventually finished that job, and I got out of the Navy, and I continued in the diving industry, teaching scuba. And for 25 years, I've been teaching scuba diving. And I've learned some life lessons that I think are applicable to daily life from diving. And one is this: it's not the amount of pressure that we experience. It's not even the duration of that pressure that we experience. It's how we respond to it that is paramount. Because if we don't respond to pressure right in diving, the impact can be detrimental, up to the point of death. And so, how do we do that? How do we adequately respond to life's pressures? Well, I'm going to give you a couple examples from just a regular scuba dive. Every time we dive, there's pressure on us. It's being exerted upon us, whether it's a deep, dark, long Navy salvage dive, or it's a 40-foot dive off of a beautiful Caribbean island looking at pretty fish, a coral reef, and crystal clear water. It's still the same physics. And if we don't ascend properly, that's where we get into trouble. So on a normal scuba dive, you have to slowly ascend, about a foot per second or slower. If you go too fast, you can get in trouble. You also have to breathe continuously. The golden rule of scuba diving: always breathe. Never, ever hold your breath. And we have to have enough air in our tank from the time we leave the bottom or end our dive to make it to the surface, the ascent, while we go slow and while we continuously breathe. It's pretty simple. However, what if there's something that occurs that's not part of a normal dive? For instance, heaven forbid, you run out of air, or you get separated from your buddy, or get lost, or you get entrapped or entangled in something. I just dove yesterday off Point Loma and had to get a guy out of a fishing hook that he didn't know he was entangled in. We have to be able to respond to these, and the response to these is counterintuitive. It's stop. I worked for a master diver who said there's nothing stop can't fix. And it's like, all right, master diver, I'll take your word for it. But then I started teaching recreational scuba diving, and that's true. We teach a phrase, stop, think, and act, not the reverse. Often we do the reverse. We just react, and we try to think about it. Stop, think, and act. We can apply that to our own lives, and it will help, I think, immensely in how we deal with our pressure or our stress. I've had plenty of stressful events in my life, out of the ordinary stressful events, from medical stuff, family issues, business disasters. And every time I've stopped and thought about it and then executed, that's when things went better. And one thing I'll add, we always have a buddy with us when we dive. At least you should always have a buddy with you when you dive. On the Flight 800 recovery, there was no less than 15 people supporting 2 divers in the water at any given moment. And often, if you come up against a situation that you just can't handle yourself, like in diving, if I was entrapped in something, I needed assistance, there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes we just need help. We need a team to support us through the ascent of great pressure in our life. I really wish I could tell you that the pressures of life will end and be subdued at some point, but I won't. That's just a lie. Life is a perpetual dive. We're constantly submerged in its pressures. And so we have to decide, how are we going to respond to those? Well, the next time you're in a pressure situation, I would really encourage you to stop, think, and act. And get some assistance from your topside team if you need it. A trusted friend, even a professional. We recovered all 230 souls. And our handling of the pressure, our response to those dives in those situations, relieved the pressure of the family and friends on the beach. So when you really are up against it, stop, think, and act. Never ever hold your breath. Breathe. And when you need it, get some topside support. Seek that help out. And you will live to dive another day.